welcome to Cyberview, where we discuss what's new in tech and cybersecurity field. Today, you're joined by the hosts Carlos and Frida, and myself, Gerald. On today's episode, we have three major topics to discuss. So firstly, we'll talk about how hackers are selling genetic data of millions of 23andMe users. Then we'll talk about Clorox sales and profit, how it took a big hit after cyber incident, which will reveal a huge plot twist in there also. And lastly, we'll talk about fashion, how AI is potentially becoming a fashionable trend. So let's talk about 23andMe. Hackers are selling genetic data of the company, potentially affecting up to 7 million accounts. And 23andMe offer DNA testing, so ancestry information and personalized health insights. And it is important to note that the breach, according to 23andMe, didn't compromise internally with the organization. So instead, apparently what happened was all related to credential stuffing, with basically hackers getting hands on the user credentials and being able to access their credentials.
Well, I think that credential stuffing is actually very hard to detect, especially, for example, in this case. As far as I know, as far as I remember, this type of ancestry and 23andMe and so on, they don't support two-factor authentication. So even if you have, for example, two-factor authentication on your Gmail, let's say, and for some reason your password gets leaked somewhere, and of course, for convenience sake, you are always using the same password. Might be a very secure password, so you say, well, why not? Why shouldn't I use it somewhere else? The problem is that, once they try to get into your Gmail, they will bump into the two-factor authentication, and that's it. That's the end of their journey. But if they start using on any single website, whatever, you might have an account there or not, if there's no two-factor authentication, if there's no single sign-on enabled on those type of websites, then no matter how safe your password is, no matter if you're using like a very, very secure password, it will be leaked at some point for some reason. So it's better not to use the same password, even if it's super safe.
Exactly what I was thinking. So 23andMe should first of all be commended for confirming the breach's cause. They demonstrated a lot of transparency here and communication with their customers. But you're right, Carlos. It's fascinating to me because if they did have SSO, that would really help everyone out, because then there would be MFA built in, right? And as much as we would all love to say, okay, everyone set a really strong password, right? Like a 25-character password is the strongest you can go, and then have MFA on. It's still not entirely on the customers themselves to do all of this. I do think that 23andMe, especially for what they do with health data, should have done a better job of protecting data as well.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Frida, I absolutely agree with you. I think the two sides to the story, right? Well, firstly, yes, it's up to the users. We need to make sure that we get into the habit of using password management solution, right? That has a sweet spot in my heart. And by using a password management solution, what Carlos was referring to, you can utilize a password generator, meaning that you can end up having a unique password for every login that you use, right? Especially if we as users utilize site like 23andMe that collects your genetic data. And just open-hearted here, that's one of the reasons I never use any of the genetic data websites, because I don't want my my genetic data to be available in a web somewhere and to be sold somewhere. But so that's the one side of the coin. The other side of the coin, I absolutely agree with you, Frida, that it's up to the provider of a tool as such, especially where we're looking at genetic medical data itself, to make sure that there are minimum requirements to make sure that users that aren't aware of the security and don't normally think around multi-factor authentications or single sign-ons, Frida, as you mentioned, to log in safely to the site, they need to be forced to it. Therefore, it's up to that vendor to make sure that they enforce two-factor authentication. To the listeners, two-factor authentication would basically scan your face or fingerprint, or multi-factor authentication where you need to authenticate that, yes, it's Gerald logging in, you get text message, you get code, things like that would prevent hackers stealing my password from other websites and gaining access to 23andMe, for instance, because 7 million accounts being affected. I think that's around half of their users. That's a red flag to the vendor, from my perspective also.
So I just want to talk about credential stuffing really quick, and just the importance of everyone changing their password and what that means. Because 23andMe it's claiming that there's not an actual traditional data breach in this case. So that does mean that, according to them, hackers have found these usernames and passwords that are already being used by users of the site, and then using those same credentials to log in, then take their health information and sell it, essentially. So to Gerald's point, this is also why I don't have my information in 23andMe, and I've never used any of these services as well. But we're all paranoid cybersecurity people here. And I just wanted to emphasize that the importance of, users being able to turn on MFA, but knowing that this is on the company side and employee side as well.
Yeah, and talking about that same topic, we can't pretend that every single person that is using this type of websites are cybersecurity specialists or IT specialists, for that matter. It's super hard to know what MFA is, what SSO means. For example, if I told my parents, for example, like, hey, you should enable MFA on your phone, they will like, what is MFA? And if I try to explain to them, they will like, you know what? I prefer the hackers to have my data. This is too complicated. So it is on the website to make sure that they make it easy for non-cybersecurity savvy people to be able to be safe. We need to make sure that not all people, not only the people that knows what cybersecurity measures we should take, are able to use your service securely.
Food for thought, the websites that utilize sensitive information like health information should have minimum security measures implemented for every single user, meaning mandatory multi-factor authentication, right? At least those type of things.
Exactly. That would help, right? If you're a company that's telling everyone that you should have done this, right? Perhaps we should force that then. Right on, Gerald.
Another cyber incident to talk about. Cleaning giant Clorox suffered a cyber incident in August, and they say that quarterly sales will drop by more than 20% due to the cyber incident they suffered. And they had to come out public and talk about it because of the new rules implemented by SEC earlier in September. But what's interesting here also, that the breach happened because of the hacker group behind it that was also behind MGM hack. So we'll talk about it a little bit more as well and see how it's all connected.
So, well, talking about Clorox, what happened to them? I think it's, again, a red flag all over the place. We saw what happened to the casinos in Las Vegas. We have seen what has been happening all around with banks, with websites, with credential stuff, and so on. So someone will think like, hey, maybe we should start thinking, we should start looking into our cybersecurity. Sadly, that's not what is happening. We are seeing it right now. Clorox was hacked, was breached, and their production was affected. And of course, this is a domino effect. Once the production is affected, the deliveries to their customers is affected as well. If the deliveries are affected, sales are affected as well. And it goes on, all the way to the investors, all the way to stocks, market, and so on and so forth. So it's very, very dangerous because it's a very slippery slope. You never know how big a breach will be until it happens. So you need to make sure that everything is very, very secure, not only by yourself, because once you are inside, you get what is called workshop blindness. You are so focused on what you are doing here that you don't step away and say, like, you know what, the whole panorama is way different to what I'm looking at right now. This is very true for example, cybersecurity specialists. If they're securing a database, they might not be focusing on network. And the guys that are looking into the network, they might not be looking into the database. So it's very, very important to also have third parties to be monitoring your infrastructure, to be doing some pen testing of some sorts. And I think that's something that is kind of like the very minimum, especially for these multi-million companies.
Totally agreed. Yeah, especially, when it's gonna cut off, slash up to 28% of your revenue, like it has in this case for Clorox, right? Yep. And correct me if I'm wrong, unlike MGM Grand, I mean, this is a supply chain ransomware attack. So that's a whole different ballgame. It could be years for them to recover, if they even recover. And I know that I'm being dramatic here, but maybe I'm not, because it has led to a nationwide shortage of Clorox products already. And when it's just this hard product that's being affected, I mean, the amount of things that go into that are compromised is so high. So it's I agree, Carlos. I think that, and I know that we say this again and again, but it's so much better and so much less costly. And you'll have maybe a company afterwards if you're being more proactive about security rather than this reactive situation now. And I think the reason this keeps happening is many, right? But the biggest one, I think, is that companies don't want to invest in proactive security. So they would, to me, the logic is stunning, right? Like, because you would rather have a 10 million or maybe like $10 billion like breach, depending, rather than investing like $1 million, maybe not even that, proactively into a good pen tester or some kind of proactive security program. To Carlos's point, like, I think just companies don't expect it to happen to them. And Clorox probably expected just not to be a target for whatever reason. They're just like, we're a trusted brand. We've been around, and we sell wipes. So they're still, they got wrecked.
Yeah, Frida, interesting points. And actually, I put a business hat on here because I look at it from slightly different perspective also, where, of course, they suffered a major revenue drop due to cyber incident itself. And also, you mentioned around possibly them cutting costs and not investing enough in cyber resiliency tools and so on. But for me, the big issue I see here that could be snowballing for years to come is the lack of trust from the market now. Because as we saw, the drop in revenue for them of 20% is actually might be nothing compared to the loss of trust in the market. Because at the beginning of the year, they were talking at first that they're going to be making a huge profits this year in terms of revenue and everything. And because of that, obviously their share price has gone up. And then they had a cyber incident in August, which they didn't talk about, which obviously there were no rules for them to come out public. Fair enough. And then SEC released a rule change beginning of September saying that any company that suffers a cyber incident, a major cyber incident, they have to come out publicly. And rightfully so, because of that, Clorox had to come out publicly and talk about the breach they suffered. And as soon as they came out, that had a massive hit on their stock value. So meaning that the trust from the market suffered tremendously. And automatically the stock prices went down, the company value went down, and now they are saying they're going to make huge losses this year in terms of obviously the value of the company itself. That goes beyond the revenue drop of 20%. So automatically, to me, that just outlines a massive red flag, a massive issue that could obviously continue for years, as you further mentioned as well, where suddenly the people don't trust to invest into that company that maybe, this is me talking subjectively, that maybe cut corners and didn't invest enough money into cyber resilience tools. And we see that happening over and over again as well. Even now, I mean, this is a continuous saga, right? I'm just jumping onto MGM a bit, which is also somewhat connected because of the same hacker group behind the incident here as well. But MGM said they suffered total losses of around $100 million US, right? So automatically now looking at the cost of how much would it cost to implement cyber resilience tools that could potentially prevent from incidents as such would be a fraction. And that's the big issue that I see with major companies taking is not investing enough and thinking that we're not going to be hit. Yeah. Look at what happened over last. I'm not even talking this year. I'm talking about last couple of months or weeks. The type of companies being targeted, the type of losses they suffered. We look at major players in the market believing that they might not be targets, and here they are. Look at Clorox, right? So there's a huge learning point here, and Clorox as well. We'll see how long it takes for them to fully stand back up on their feet if they can. Lastly, AI technology is looking to enter fashion industry with the wearable devices. Of course, this is not the first time we've seen this happen. AI is becoming a massive trend, and now with wearable devices becoming more popularized to make sure that people utilize the AI to the full potential. We've seen a couple of examples being released recently. So Meta introduced a partnership with Ray-Ban glasses that will have AI implemented with those being released. Then Rewind.ai introduced a pendant that would be worn on the neck, as well as OpenAI joined forces with former Apple's chief design officer to create so-called iPhone for artificial intelligence. So where is this heading? Where this is going towards to? Let's discuss and talk about implications and potential benefits of it.
I hate all of that stuff. No, I'm good. No, it just makes me very sad that it doesn't matter if I hate it, because someone else will be wearing it and recording everything I say. So it doesn't really matter how I feel.
Yeah, and the problem here is that most of the time, as we were discussing the other day, if we have an Alexa, if we have a Google Assistant, if we are using even this like smartphone earphones or whatever, we are already sending our data to Samsung, to Google, to Apple, to Amazon. So yeah, if we keep giving more and more and more, at some point, I mean, who is going to be the owner of our own videos, our own conversation? I mean, and for example, of these new pendants that they are going to be starting selling at some point, they actually record everything that you say. They transcribe it into a database, and then you can search for it whenever you want. It's fine at some point if you are like, for example, want to remember what you were discussing with your partner or with your colleagues or so on and so forth. But on the other hand, who is going to keep this information safe? I mean, we have seen so many hacks. I mean, how are these companies are going to keep our data safe now that they're going to have more and more and more?
Yeah, there's so many Black Mirror episodes on this. Like, it doesn't matter what marketing terms are being used or what special buzzwords are coming out. I will say, if you don't understand the buzzword, it's not you. It's on purpose, right? It's purposefully confusing. So I would say at this point, and I've been overly focusing over here, as you can tell, for a reason, because I can't believe I'm saying this, but I do think that everyone should actually read privacy policies now. Read what companies are actually putting out and what they're doing. And I know that's also a scam because they're 100 pages long on purpose, right? And I'm looking away because I'm trying. There's an actual, and hopefully we can link this later or put this out there. I'm sure we can. There's a site that will summarize those terms for you and tell you exactly what they're doing in very simplistic layman's terms, without all of the fluff, right? So read the device's privacy policy. And I know we spoke about this last time with self-driving cars. See what data is being collected and how it's being used, and also how it's being collected, right? Because I know we haven't talked about TikTok yet. We probably should at some point, maybe now. They were infamous for a recent update where they're actually tracking users' eye movements to see what they're most interested in and what they linger on, right? In terms of content. Everything is about attention and selling, I think, consumer stuff. Just assume that stuff is going to be sold at this point. So just opt out wherever you can, right? And just review those policies.
I'll be devil's advocate again. It's easy to say this when you are a data geek and you understand the privacy concerns here and stuff. But then everyday users, especially if we're looking at perhaps teenagers, let's admit they don't care. Fine, collect my data. I don't care. Most of my data is already on the internet. That's what the teenager is going to say. And Meta, they're doing a great job by partnering with one of the most famous eyewear brands in the world with Ray-Ban, right? They're trying to avoid the issues that Google Glass had, where suddenly they couldn't really penetrate the market. Now, if they go with Ray-Ban and obviously produce AI-driven glasses, probably people will buy it because, let's admit, Ray-Bans generally look cool, right? To me, the concern is going to be actually slightly bigger. So it's not necessarily, no one's going to read the terms and conditions most likely, and right, they're going to be always long because lawyers want to include everything in there to protect themselves. The big thing for me is going to be the data that's being collected without people's consent, right? Like for instance, I have Apple Watch that collects my data. I actually given consent and so on. But imagine if now I go ahead and say, oh, by the way, this is going to collect the data of surrounding people and it's going to, by Bluetooth, pick up your heart rate and Carlos' heart rate. Now that's going to analyze that as well, not just my data, right? That's the type of concern we're facing here. So I think the big concern here is going to be the consent and who's going to be legislating. Is it going to be self-legislated by the organizations? Who needs to step in? Because one thing is to record the conversations or videos, live stream videos. At least that's what Meta advertised. So you being able to live stream on Instagram, for instance, whatever you're seeing through your Ray-Bans or translate stuff. Some of those things, great, is going to be helpful. But then other things going to be recording stuff without your consent. So you'll see people wearing Ray-Bans and those Ray-Bans might be recording what you do without your consent. And maybe some things that you wouldn't want it to be public, right? That's the biggest concern here. And we have certain states or certain countries in the world where consent needs to be given. And I think that's where the big issue is going to come up, possibly even with lawsuits, I would presume. Because, if you, Carlos, recording something and I haven't given my consent, you're breaking the law.
I want companies, of course, to make sure that consent is not hidden in lengthy terms or conditions, right? But presented in a user-friendly manner. And it's not on purpose, as we've all stated.
The only way they're going to be able to navigate through now with that corporate governance itself, where they're going to shift that responsibility onto the user. So they'll say, well, Frida, if you're using Ray-Bans with AI, it's up to you to make sure you don't break the law and you don't record where it's unlawful to do so. And suddenly now Meta just washes their hands and, you as a user, you didn't know, so you can't sue Meta. You need to sue Frida. That's it for today's episode. The Cyberview episode brought to you by Nord Security. It's been great to talk with my fellow hosts, Carlos and Frida. Just to remind everyone, Cyberview is a recurring series, so we're excited to bring a new episode to you frequently. Stay tuned.